Welcome back to another episode of Warren Cali. In this episode, I'm going to talk about Tracy Batts and his homie Terrence from Atlantic Drive, Compton Crip. Ben and his brother Brian were both from Atlantic Drive, Compton Crip. One morning in September of 1997, Ben was washing his car in front of apartments on Atlantic Drive in Compton. Tracy and Terrence pulled up in a car and got into an altercation with Ben. They told him he was no good and he had to leave the hood. Tracy already had a previous altercation with Ben. By this time of the altercation, Brian came out of his apartment to back up his brother. Tracy and Terrence then got in their car and drove off. But this wouldn't be the end. Tracy and Terrence returned shortly, and Tracy pulled out two straps, and Terrence pulled out his own. They started firing at Ben and Brian. Both Ben and Brian got shot the fuck up. Brian lost his life, and Ben was shot multiple times, but he survived. Brian's girlfriend watched from the window and ran outside to see her man Brian dead, and she seen Ben leaking. Ben yelled out Tracy and Terrence shot him. Ben was later taken to the hospital. But just a few hours after that, Tracy ass got the same karma. He was shot in the shoulder. Just hours later, he ended up being in the same hospital that Ben was in. Police pressed Tracy, and he said he didn't know who shot him. He said he didn't even know what happened to Brian or Ben, and he had nothing to do with them. When interviewed in the hospital, Ben told the police Tracy and Terrence shot him. He even picked Tracy out of a photo lineup. But Ben told the police he didn't want to testify because he was scared for his life and scared for his family's life. But just a few days later, Ben was still in the hospital and Tracy's brother paid him a visit. He told Ben not to testify or it was going to be his family and his ass. Ben still didn't listen. Just weeks later, he picked Tracy out of a lineup, and this time, he picked Terrence too. Just months later, Ben's 10-year-old brother started receiving threats and even was told his brother was going to be finished. January 1998, Terrence got into a physical altercation with his wife, leading to her calling the police, and she told the police that Terrence put his hands on her and that she was afraid of him. She even told the police that Terrence shot multiple people, including Ben and Brian, like she completely sold his ass out. Terrence liked beating his wife. Now he had to beat life because he was arrested on the spot. Just the same month, Ben was shot up by some man he said he couldn't identify. He told police he believed they had to be connected to Tracy and Terrence though, because all the threats and them previously trying to take his life. Tracy was tried in court separately in 1998. Tracy was found guilty in the trial, but was granted a new trial after evidence came forth and it was reversed. March of 1999, 9 months after Tracy's trial in 98, Ben was brutally shot after being chased down and shot by multiple men. Ben was just so happily shot in the Atlantic Drive Compton Crip's turf, where he was from. I don't know why he stayed there. He snitched multiple times, and he was shot multiple times being in the area, so they was on him. This will all lead to a second trial, where both Tracy and Terrence were tried. Even though Ben was dead by this time, all his testimony was used in court against Terrence and Tracy. This trial ended in a mistrial though. But once again in 2000, Tracy and Terrence was retried, and this time it ended in them being convicted, and both were sentenced to life in prison. Police would say Tracy and Terrence were lifelong gang members and menaced to their communities from doing things like robberies, assaults, and multiple shootings. Police would say the streets don't need ever to see them again, and they hope they never got out. Tracy is now 56 and has been in prison for the last 22 years. He is eligible for parole in 2026. Terrence is now 60 and also been in prison for the last 22 years. Terrence is eligible for parole in 2023. This will conclude this episode. If you haven't already, make sure you check out my previous videos. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe.